start typing up my favorite stories so I could keep them. And as I've been cleaning out, I came across two of them that I had saved. Two of many. I'm sure eventually I'll start reading some of the others that I really loved as a kid, but I'm just going to do black screen ASMR. Hopefully it'll be something that you can fall asleep to. But the first story is The Gift and the Giver by Russell G. Davis and Brent Ashebritter. Once a poor farmer found a beautiful apple growing on a tree in his fields. The apple was so large, so shiny, and so well shaped that the farmer cried with joy when he saw it. Now, had he seen such a beautiful apple on a tree in this country? No, he had not. The farmer picked the apple and wrapped it in his cloak and brought it to his home. He showed it to his wife and children. They were as amazed as he was to see such a beautiful apple. Other farmers who lived in that village heard of the apple and came to the house to see it. They too agreed that it was a wondrous apple. Farmers from distant villages came to see the fruit. They touched it tenderly and exclaimed in loud Saul, said Frampton. My sister was staying here at the rectory, some 4 years ago, and she gave me letters of introduction to some of the people here. He made the last statement in a tone of distinct regret. Then you know practically nothing about my aunt, pursued the self-possessed young lady. Only her name and address, admitted the caller. He was wondering whether Mrs. Sappleton was in the married or widowed state. An undefinable something about the room seemed to suggest masculine habitation. Her great tragedy happened just 3 years ago, said the child. That would be since her sister's time. Her tragedy, asked Frampton. Somehow in this restful country spot tragedy seemed out of place. You may wonder why we keep that window open on an October afternoon, said the niece, indicating a large French window that opened onto the lawn. It is quite warm for this time of the year, said Frampton, but what has that window got anything to do with that tragedy? Out through that window 3 years ago to a day, her husband and her two brothers went off for a day's shooting. They never came back. And crossing the moor to their favorite snipe shooting ground, they were all engulfed in a treacherous piece of bog. It had been that dreadful wet summer, and places that were safe in other years gave way suddenly without warning. Their bodies were never recovered. That was the dreadful part of it. Here the child's voice lost its self-possessed note and became falteringly human. Poor aunt always thinks that they will come back some day. They and the little brown spaniel that was lost with them, and walk in that window just as they used to do. This is why the window is kept open every evening till it is quite dusk. Poor dear aunt, she has often told me how they went out, her husband with his white waterproof coat over his arm, and Ronnie, her youngest brother, singing "Bertie, why do you bound?" as he always did to tease her, because she said it got on her nerves. Do you know, sometimes on still, quiet evenings like this, almost get a creepy feeling that they will all walk through that window. She broke off with a little shudder. It was a relief to Frampton when the aunt bustled into the room with a whirl of apologies for being late in making her appearance. I hope Vera has been amusing you, she said. She has been very interesting, said Frampton. I hope you don't mind the open window, said Sappleton briskly. My husband and brothers will be home directly from shooting, and they always come in this way. They've been out for snipe in the marshes today, so they'll make a fine mess of